Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Beis, Daf 12 of Masechta Yoma. Chevra, we got a good Daf over here in Masechta Yoma. Some interesting things, like the inheritance of Jerusalem. Was Jerusalem divided up to all of the tribes of Israel, or maybe just to a select two? So, that's interesting machlokas. Next, the gartel of the kohen gadol, the avnei, the belt of the kohen gadol. Well, okay, the kohen gadol and the kohen hedyot, like the regular kohen, the kohen gadol. What was it made out of? What about the belt of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur? These are interesting things. Using the garments that the kohen gadol wore on Yom Kippur, right? So on Yom Kippur, the kohen gadol, when he did the avoda in the Kodesh HaKodashim, he was only wearing the 4 white garments, which are basically the regular garments, essentially, of the kohen hedyot that a regular kohen wears. The question is, can a different, for the rest of the year, can a kohen hedyot use the garments that the kohen gadol used when he was doing the avoda lifnai v'lifnim on Yom Kippur? And then, interestingly, we have a discussion about the backup kohen gadol. So if you have, for whatever reason, the kohen gadol needed the backup, what becomes of that backup? What's his status going forward? So this is all interesting things. So let's get started on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. On the very first line of the Daf, Udichrachim ein mitame b'negoim. The last thing that we had said yesterday is that we were discussing the potential for a synagogue to contract tzara'as. And the last suggestion that we gave, so one source said that a synagogue cannot get tzara'as, another source says that a synagogue can get tzara'as, and we said that the distinction might be that, well, a synagogue that's in a big city cannot get tzara'as because it's not owned by any one person, right? And it says v'asher lo habayis, that the fellow who owns the house will come to the kohen and says that kinega nirali babayis, that I've seen something that appears to be like a tzara'as. And because it has to belong to a particular person, so if you have a synagogue in a city that's people coming in and coming out, doesn't, it's unclear who it belongs to, so therefore it would not contract tzara'as. However, the synagogue in a sort of a smaller village kind of thing, so where everybody knows who the synagogue belongs to, so then it can get tzara'as. Okay, now the Gemara, is it really true that the synagogue of a city cannot contract tzara'as? Ve'otanya. But we have a brayso, achuz aschem. The pasuk says that you'll come to, right, kisavo el eretz Canaan asher ani nu. What's the pasuk? Is that? Yeah, it is. Is that the same pasuk? No, it's not. Yes, it is. Kisavo el eretz Canaan asher ani nosin lachem lachuzav v'nasati nega tzara'as b'veis eretz achuz aschem. That will give an affliction of tzara'as in the house, in the land of your achuzah, of your inheritance. I don't know if that's the right word to translate achuzah, but let's go with it. So be'eretz achuzaschem, in like the land that you're gonna inherit, I guess, right? Like, is that the right word? Nochel, to inherit, like that the Eibishter kind of like divided up Eretz Yisrael to all the people. Okay, achuzaschem mitamim b'negoyim ve'Yerushalayim mitamim b'negoyim. So the Tanna Kama is saying that the part of Israel that's divided up among the people, that the people inherit, so that you can contract right be'eretz achuzaschem, in the parts of the land that is divided up and given to the people, so there can be tzara'as. Ve'en Yerushalayim mitamim b'negoyim. However, Jerusalem is not subject to the tumah of tzara'as of the buildings. Rabbi Yehuda, ani lo shamati al makom mikdash bilvad. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I only heard about the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash doesn't get tzara'as, but anywhere outside of the Beis HaMikdash, even in Jerusalem, can get tzara'as. Okay? And Zok the Gemara, V'afagav, where am I? Habate Knesias Uvate Midrashos Mitam B'negoyim. Right, so it says Rabbi Yehuda that only the Beis HaMikdash doesn't get tzara'as, but any other synagogues or study halls, mitam b'negoyim, they can get negoyim, they can get tzara'as. V'afagav dikrachim nenu, even though they could be in a city, right? Rabbi Yehuda is saying that the Beis HaMikdash doesn't get tzara'as, but outside the Beis HaMikdash in Jerusalem, you can get tzara'as. Any building can get tzara'as, even a synagogue. So why? And that's Jerusalem, the big city. So why are we assuming that synagogues in cities don't get tzara'as? So Ema Amr Rabbi Yehuda Ani lo shamati al makom mekudash bilvad. All right, so we could say that Rabbi Yehuda says that no, not the makom mikdash. Not only the Beis Hamikdash doesn't get saras, but any makom mekudash doesn't get saras. Any holy place doesn't get saras, and therefore, synagogues would not contract saras. All right, fine, sounds okay to me. We're going to see that we're going to end up kind of throwing this out ultimately. Anyways, any shilas you may have had, hold them for a shtickle. Fine. But my kamifligate, what exactly is the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda? Why does the Tanakama say that you can get saras on a building anywhere in Eretz Yisrael, but just not Jerusalem? And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can even get saras on buildings in Jerusalem, just not the Beis Hamikdash. Tanakama savar Yerushalayim lo nischak l'shvatim, Rabbi Yehuda savar Yerushalayim nischak l'shvatim. So the Gemara answers, well, that gets to the question of, was Jerusalem divided up to the tribes of Israel? If you say that Jerusalem was divided up to the tribes of Israel, well then it's considered Eretz Achuzaschem, and it can contract saras, which is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying, that Jerusalem can contract saras, just not the Beis Hamikdash. And if you say that Jerusalem was not divided up to the tribes, well then it's not considered Eretz Achuzaschem, and therefore Jerusalem entirely does not contract Tumah of the structures of the buildings. And that's like the Tanakama. We've looked at the Hani Tanoi, and it's like the machlokas of the following Tanoim. The Tanya is we learn in the Brayso, Mahayu bechelko shel Yehuda. Which part of the Beis Hamikdash was in the portion of Judah? Harabayis, the Temple Mount. I believe that that's basically the entire area of the Beis Hamikdash outside of like the Azara and all of those things. Like when we talk about the Beis Hamikdash, I think we're generally talking about like the Azara area. Particularly like where the Mizbeach and all that kind of stuff is. Like all those, the Shachos, all those like offices and stuff. I think all that stuff is happening like in that, main sort of rectangular area in the middle. Anyway, so the Harabayis I think is kind of all of Temple Mount outside of that main area where all the Azaras and the Mizbeach and everything was. Halishachos v'Azaros, so Harabayis, so the Temple Mount and all the offices and the Azaras, that was in the area, in the inheritance of Judah. And which part of the Beis Hamikdash was in the portion of Binyamin? Ulam, Veheichal, Uveis Kodesh HaKodashim. So that is like the innermost part of the like Azaris, which is the Ulam, which is like that big kind of entryway which leads into the Heichal. And then behind the Heichal is the Kodesh HaKodashim. That was in the area of Binyamin. And actually, as Rashi points out, that it doesn't only start at the Heichal, it starts actually a little bit before then at the Mizbeach. So really from the Mizbeach HaChitzon and inwards was the portion of Binyamin, and outside of that was the portion of Judah. And there was like a strip that extended from the portion of Judah into the portion of Binyamin. And that was the beginning of the Mizbeach. That was kind of where the Mizbeach was. So basically, it's a little bit hard to describe. The best thing is if you could find like a diagram. But so the area of Judah would go, into the Ezras Noshim, and then all the Ezras Noshim was in the part of Judah. Okay, then you would get into the kind of through the Shar Nicanor, and you would have the Ezras Yisrael and the Ezras Kohanim, and then you would get up to the Mishkan. No, not the Mishkan, the Mizbeach. Now, the Mizbeach was kind of sliced on a diagonal, so from the northeast corner to the southwest corner. So sort of so if you kind of cut the Mizbeach, which was a square, like diagonally, so then from the northeast corner to the southwest corner, so the part on the right was in the portion of Judah, and the part on the left was in the portion of Binyamin. And Binyamin was like mitzdayer. He was like stressed about it all the time, that he wished that the entire Mizbeach could be in his portion. Shnema, as the pasuk says, he was like scratching about it all day. It's funny, Rashi even explains, like somebody who has like a big taiva for something, like lahavdil, almost like we imagine like an addict who needs to get his fix of whatever he needs. He's kind of scratching about it. So Binyamin was always like scratching about this portion of the Mizbeach that was outside of his inheritance. Because Binyamin Tzaddik was so passionate about having the Mizbeach in his inheritance, so God made Binyamin his host. Shenemar, as the Apostle says, that the Eibishter dwells among Binyamin's shoulders, i.e. that the Aron, which is in the Kodesh HaKodashim, was entirely in Binyamin's portion. Super interesting, right? So according to this Tana, so Jerusalem was divided up to the tribes. Part of it was Judah, part of it was Binyamin. Part of the Beis HaMikdash was in the portion of Judah, part of the Beis HaMikdash was in the portion of Binyamin. Whereas the Tanakama, who says that Jerusalem does not contract tsaras of the buildings, says that Jerusalem was not divided up to any of the Shvatim, rather it belonged to all of the Shvatim, all of the tribes equally. The Tanya, as we learned in the Brayse, we don't rent out houses. You're not allowed to rent out a house in Jerusalem, because it doesn't belong to their owners. It doesn't belong to any particular person. So even if I think that I own a property in Jerusalem, I can't rent it out to somebody because I don't actually own it. It's owned by everybody. Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon Omer says, Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, Aflomitos, you can't even rent out beds. Therefore, because the hosts of the properties, because the people who own the landlords, the people who own the properties in Jerusalem, or so to speak, own the properties in Jerusalem, because they cannot charge people to rent houses or even beds, so the way that they can get payment is that the people who are staying on these properties, so they come to Yerushalayim, they bring Shalmei Chagiga and Shalmei Simcha, so the hides, so these people who own, so to speak, these properties, they chop the hides from the people staying on these properties as their payment, right? That kilu, these people are coming to Jerusalem, they bring different kinds of shlomim, different kinds of sacrifices. So these landlords take the hides as their payment, since they can't accept payment as payments. Interesting. Abaye says, Abaye Shmamino, we learned from here, Orach Ar Lemishbek Inish Gulfo Mishchalu Ushpize. Period. Abaye says, so we learned from here that when you stay at somebody's house, you should bring him a jug made out of pottery, as well as some raw animal hides. Keep that in mind the next time you go away for Shabbos. Make sure you have enough time to pick up from maybe Shuk Machne Yehuda a raw animal hide to offer your host. Okay, so what do we see? So we see that it's taka machlokas about if Jerusalem was divided up to the tribes or not. According to one opinion, it was, part of the Beis HaMikdash was in the portion of Judah, part of the Beis HaMikdash was in the portion of Binyamin. According to the other opinion, Jerusalem B'chlal was not divided up to any particular Shvatim, it belonged to everybody. So the Tanakama, who says that there's no tsaras of the houses in Jerusalem, he holds like the Manda Omer, who says that Jerusalem was not divided up to any tribes, and Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you can get tsaras of the structures in Jerusalem, so he holds that Jerusalem was divided up to, like the Tanu says, Har Bayis, right, the Beis HaMikdash was partially in Judah and partially in Binyamin. Frek the Gemara u'dechvarim mimetame b'negoyim. But one second, even the synagogues of villages can those contract negoyim? Right, we were assuming up until now that okay, so we wanted to say that maybe the synagogues in cities shouldn't contract tsaras because it's unclear who they're owned by, but at least the synagogues in the villages where we kind of know who owns it, so then it can contract tsaras. But says the Gemara, maybe that's not even so simple either. Can the synagogues in villages contract tsaras? We learned in the Brayse Lachuza that for inheritance, right? That by tzaras it has to be a place of inheritance. Also, they have to capture Eretz Yisrael first. If they had captured Eretz Yisrael, but they hadn't yet divided up to the different tribes, even if they divided up the land of Israel into the different tribes, but they didn't divide up the tribes into the different families, and then even once they divided up Eretz Yisrael and the different portions of the tribes into different families, but if you don't yet know which portion belongs to your family, minayin, how do you know that still tzaras wouldn't be able to kick in the houses? Right? It says that the fellow who has tzaras of the house goes to the kohen. He has to know exactly which one's his house. Yotzu elu she'en miyuchadin lo, to the exclusion of these houses that aren't exclusively for you, if you don't yet know which one exactly is your house, and therefore it also excludes the synagogue, that it doesn't specifically belong to any one person. Therefore, it makes more sense to say, like we said originally, that when one brisa says, or when one source says that synagogues can get tzaras, and another source says that synagogues cannot get tzaras. So we made a distinction initially that it depends if there's an apartment in the synagogue or not for the person who works there to live. If there's an apartment, it can contract tzaras. If there's no apartment, then it doesn't contract tzaras. Yeah, and that was there was no problems with that suggestion. Whereas we wanted to suggest that maybe it depends if it's in a big city or a small village. We had kashas on the big city, we had kashas on the small village. We said kind of leave that to the side. Zok the Gemara maskinu lo kohen acher. Okay, so the Mishnah had said that the kohen gadol quarantines for 7 days, and we also set up a backup kohen gadol just in case the kohen gadol gets some kind of a psul, some kind of reason why he wouldn't be able to do the avodah on Yom Kippur. So then you have the backup prepared. Fact the Gemara. So here's the interesting thing, friends. This backup, if he's going to be doing the avodah, he has to be the kohen gadol. The avodah on Yom Kippur, interestingly enough, mamish, the entire avodah, shechting the korban tamid, everything needs to be done only by the kohen gadol. And therefore, if a psul happens with the kohen gadol becomes pasul. He sees carry, whatever it might be. He can't do the avodah. So this isn't just a backup. We have to make this backup into a kohen gadol. The kohen gadol is not available to do the avodah. The avodah is only kosher by a kohen gadol. This backup, we have to do something to make him into a kohen gadol. So it says the Gemara, I understand if the primary kohen gadol became pasul before the Talmud Shel Shachar, because then how do we make this kohen? Interesting that we seem to be making a distinction here between the avodah of Yom Kippur versus the Talmud Shel Shachar. Okay, seder, fine, whatever it is. This backup kohen gadol, how do we make him into an actual kohen gadol so that when he then does the avodah of Yom Kippur, he will already be the kohen gadol? So says the Gemara, well, if the primary kohen gadol became pasul before the Talmud Shel Shachar, well, let the backup put on the 8 garments of the kohen gadol, do the avodah of the Talmud Shel Shachar. By doing the avodah of the Talmud Shel Shachar in all the 8 garments of the kohen gadol, he'll then become the kohen gadol. So now by the time the avodah of Yom Kippur, of the specific to Yom Kippur, comes around, he's already the kohen gadol because he already did the korban Talmud Shel Shachar in the 8 garments of the kohen gadol. He's now a kohen gadol. Mazel tov. So it says the Gemara, Pshita irbo psul kodem Talmud Shel Shachar. So certainly, obviously, if the primary kohen gadol became pasul before the offering of the morning offering on Yom Kippur, mechanchin also b'Talmud Shel Shachar. So we inaugurate the backup kohen gadol to actually be a kohen gadol by offering the Talmud Shel Shachar in the 8 garments of the kohen gadol. Ela irbo psul achar Talmud Shel Shachar. But what happens if the primary kohen gadol becomes pasul after he had already offered the korban Talmud Shel Shachar, b'amim mechanchin also? Then how do we make the backup into an actual kohen gadol prior to the avodah of Yom Kippur, so that by the time he's doing the avodah of Yom Kippur, he's already mamish a kohen gadol? Says Rav Ada Bar Ahava, well, there's a difference. The difference between the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur and a Kohen Hedyot is regarding the belt. That a Kohen Gadol, all of the days of the year, his belt is made out of shatnez. It's made out of kilayim. It's made out of a combination of linen as well as different kinds of wools. Now the belt of the Kohen Hedyot is also made out of shatnez. However, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he does the avoda in the 4 garments of a Kohen Hedyot, the belt that he uses is purely a linen belt. And therefore, the only time that there's a Kohen who does the avoda wearing a linen belt, that is the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. When he does the avoda in the 4 garments of the Kohen Hedyot, his belt is unique in that it's a linen belt, and therefore, says Rav Ada Bar Ahava, since this backup Kohen, when he does the avoda of Yom Kippur, he's going to be wearing a linen belt, which is unique to the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. That is how he's going to distinguish himself from every other Kohen and show that he's the Kohen Gadol, and that will make him into the Kohen Gadol, and he'll be able to do the avoda of Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, so that makes sense, says the Gemara, if you assume that just like the Kohen Gadol wears a belt made out of shatnez, also Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen, wears a belt made out of shatnez, and therefore the only time when you would have a Kohen doing the avoda in a belt made out of linen would be the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Sure. But according to the opinion that while the belt of a Kohen Gadol is made out of shatnez, however the belt of a Kohen Hedyot is made out of linen. Well, if that's the case, when the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur does the avoda in the 4 garments of a Kohen Hedyot, and he's wearing a linen belt, well then he's wearing the exact same garments that a Kohen Hedyot wears every single day, in which case he's no different than a Kohen Hedyot, so what makes him into the Kohen Gadol? So what can you say? Amar Abaye, says Abaye, lo v'shmono mahapich b'tzinora. So says Abaye, well in that case, if the primary Kohen Gadol became apostle after he had already offered the Tamid Shel Shachar, and now we need to quickly inaugurate this backup Kohen make him a Kohen Gadol, what he could do is he could put in all 8 garments, go over to the Mizbeach, find the Tamid Shel Shachar that's still burning, take an iron fork and kind of flip over, stoke the meat that's on the Mizbeach, make it cook a little faster. By doing that, that's considered an avoda, and he did the avoda b'shmona begadim. Now he's the Kohen Gadol. Now he could do also the avoda of Yom Kippur. Rav Huna, like Rav Huna's opinion, to Amar Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Zar shehapach b'tzinora chayav misa. If you have a non-Kohen who climbs up onto the Mizbeach and he takes a fork and he prods the meat that's burning on the Mizbeach, that's considered an avoda, and therefore he's chayav misa. So we see that stoking the meat with, prodding the meat with that's burning with this fork, so that would be considered an avoda. Let him do that with the 8 garments. He now becomes the Kohen Gadol, Mazel Tov, and now he can do the avoda of Yom Kippur. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa avodasu mechan chaso. Says, Rav Papa actually doesn't need to climb onto the Mizbeach and poke some meat. Rather, the avoda that he does, the work, the service that he does on Yom Kippur in the Beis HaMikdash, that is enough to make him into the Kohen. Guys, sneeze. That is enough to make him into the Kohen Gadol, right? Just the fact that he does the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, that makes him memele into the Kohen Gadol. Milotani, because after all, don't we have a brayse that says, Kol Kelim Sha'asa Moshe, that all of the vessels for the Mishkan that Moshe made, Mishichasun Mikadashtan, so they anointed them with the anointing oil, and that's what made them holy. Mikan ve'elach, but from then on, after the initial building of the Mishkan, avodasim lechan chason, they wouldn't necessarily anoint the vessels with the anointing oil. They would just use them in the context of the service of the Mishkan, and that's what made them holy. So achanami here also avodasim lechan chason. So here also, Rav Papa wants to argue that in the event that the primary Kohen Gadol became apostle after he had already offered the Tamid Shel Shachar, so then how do we make the backup Kohen Gadol into an actual Kohen Gadol? By him doing the avodah of Yom Kippur, then memele makes him into the kohen gadol. Very, very interesting. Okay. Kasser of Dimi. So now we get into the discussion of the belt of a kohen hedget. The belt of a kohen hedget, was it made out of shatnez like the kohen gadol, or was it made out of linen? Because Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel Omar, he said, Avnetel shekohen hedget, when it comes to the belt of a regular kohen, Rebbe v'Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Shimon, there's a machlokas between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Shimon, chad omer shel kilayim v'chad omer shel boots. One of them says that the avnet of the kohen hedget was made out of kilayim, out of shatnez, and the other opinion is that it was made out of linen. Tistaim de Rebbe de omer shel kilayim, let us conclude that Rebbe is the one who says that the gartel of the kohen hedget was made out of kilayim, out of shatnez. The Tanya is within the Brisa, ain't been kohen gadol le kohen hedget. There's no difference between a kohen gadol and a kohen hedget. Ella avnei divi Rebbe. The only difference is the gartel, is the belt. That is Rebbe's opinion. Okay. Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon Omer af lo avnei. Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon says no, there's no difference between the belt of a kohen gadol and a kohen hedget. Okay. Amos. This machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon about, is there a difference between the kohen gadol and the kohen hedget regarding their belt or not? On what day? We're talking about Yom Kippur, we're talking about the rest of the year. If you say that we're talking about the rest of the year, Tuvaika, kohen gadol mishamish b'shmona v'hedget b'arba. What do you mean? There are a number of differences between a kohen gadol and a kohen hedget. It's not just the gartel. The kohen gadol has 8 garments. The kohen hedget has 4 garments. So if we're saying that the only difference possibly between the kohen gadol and the kohen hedget is the belt, well then we're not talking about the rest of the days of the year. Ella lab Yom Kippurim. It must be talking about on Yom Kippur. It must be talking about on Yom Kippur, when the kohen gadol does the service in the 4 garments of the kohen hedget. And we're saying that the only difference according to Rebbe is regarding the belt. That the belt of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur is made out of linen, whereas the belt of a kohen hedget the rest of the year is made out of shatnez. And Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon says, no, the belt of the kohen hedget, the belt of the kohen hedget in general is made out of linen, and therefore there's no difference between the belt of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, or any of the garments of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, and the garments of a kohen hedget the rest of the year, because they will both be, their gartel is made out of linen. So we see that Rebbe's opinion is that the gartel of a kohen hedget, it is made out of shatnez, and the gartel of a kohen hedget is made out, that the opinion of Rebbe is that the gartel of a kohen hedget is made out of shatnez, and the opinion of Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon is that the gartel of a kohen hedget is made out of linen. Fine. Amri lo le'olam b'shayim os hashana uvanach t'shavion. Okay, the shavin. The Gemara says no, it's not conclusive that we're saying that the machlokas between Rebbe and Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon is specifically on Yom Kippur. You could argue that the machlokas is actually the rest of the days of the year. And we're just saying in the garments that overlap. So sure, yeah, there's a difference between the kohen gadol and a kohen hedget. There's a difference in that the kohen gadol has 8 garments and the kohen hedget has 4 garments. That's obvious. We're saying, but even with regard to the 4 garments that overlap, the mitznefes, the hat, the avnet, the belt, the ksonis, the tunic, and the mechnasayim, the pants, those both the kohen gadol and the kohen hedget wear, and we want to say that you could theoretically argue that the machlokas between Rebbe and Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon is regarding these 4 garments for the rest of the days of the year, that Rebbe says that the difference is regarding the gartel, that the kohen gadol wears shatnez, but Dafka the kohen hedget would wear linen, and Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon would be saying that no, that there's no difference between the gartel, that they're both made out of shatnez. So it's inconclusive, right? You could say that the machlokas is Dafka on Yom Kippur, in which case Rebbe says that the gartel of a kohen hedget is made out of shatnez, and Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon says it's made out of linen, or you could say that Taka the machlokas is the rest of the days of the year, in which case Rebbe would be saying that the gartel of the kohen gadol is made out of the kohen hedget is made out of linen, and Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon would be saying that it's made out of shatnez. It's inconclusive, but let's go weiter. Kiyasa Ravin, when Ravin came, Omar, he said, and we're going to see from Ravin that it's actually explicit, it's pretty clear that Rebbe's opinion is that the avnit of the kohen hedget was made out of shatnez. So when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar, he said, Avneto shel kohen gadol b'Yom Kippurim, that the belt of a kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, divrei hakol shel butz. Everyone agrees. There's no disputing the fact that the gartel of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur was made out of linen. That's for sure. B'shai Mos Hashana divrei hakol shel kolayim, and everyone also agrees that certainly the belt of the kohen gadol the rest of the year was made out of shatnez. Certainly. Lo nechleku, however, the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is el ba'avneto shel kohen hedyet, regarding the belt of a regular kohen, bein b'shai Mos Hashana bein b'Yom Kippurim, whether it's on Rosh Hashanah, the rest of the days of the year, or whether on Yom Kippur. What was the belt of the kohen hedyet made out of? She Rebbe Omer, Rebbe's opinion is shel kilayim, that it was made out of shatnez. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon Omer shel butz. It says Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon that the belt of a kohen hedyet was made out of linen. So there you have it. Rebbe's opinion is that the belt of a kohen hedyet was made out of shatnez. The belt of a kohen, and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says that the belt of a kohen hedyet was made out of linen. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak afon unami tonina. Says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, I can also prove it to you from a brisa. Al Besaro, the pasuk says in the context of Trumas Hadeshen. Trumas Hadeshen was every single day they would take a shtickle from the ashes of the mizbeach and they would put it next to the mizbeach, I think by the Beis Hadeshen, or the Makom Hadeshen. So it says in that pasuk that he will have linen garments al Besaro. It'll be on his flesh. Matam lo yilbash. So then why? Right? It says v'lavash hakohen midovad u'michnas sevad yilbash al Besaro. Right? So the pasuk says that the kohen will wear linen garments, and then also michnasayim of linen he will wear on his flesh. So the question is, if it already says v'lavash at the beginning of the pasuk, how come it has to say yilbash again? You can just drop the word yilbash and the pasuk will be just fine. So how come it says yilbash? So abasar matam lo yilbash. How come it says yilbash? La'avi mitznefes va'avni la'ram mosadesh div Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that what we're learning out from the word yilbash, the extra word yilbash, is that the kohen who does the Trumas Hadeshen has to wear his mitznefes, his hat, ve'avnet, and his belt. Kilu, even though the pasuk only specifically mentions michnasayim, the pants, however, the Trumas Hadeshen is a proper avoda. The kohen would also have to be wearing his mitznefes, his avnet, okay, all the dalid garments. Reb Dosa Omer says, Reb Dosa lahavi big day kohen gadol b'Yom Kippurim shein kshein the kohen hedyet. Interesting. Says Reb Dosa that what we learn out from this pasuk is that from yilbash, that he will wear, what it means is that it's something separate. It's teaching that the garments that the kohen gadol wears, the 4 garments that the kohen gadol wears on Yom Kippur when he does the avoda, can be worn the rest of the year by a regular kohen hedyet. Rebbe Omer Shtei Tshuvas B'davar. Rebbe responds to Reb Dosa and he says, I can ask 2 kashas on you, Reb Dosa. Chada, number 1, the Avneta Shel Kohen Gadol B'Yom Kippurim Lo Zeu Avneta Shel Kohen Hedyet. Number 1, the gartel that the Kohen Gadol wears on Yom Kippur is different than the gartel of a Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year. So how could you say, Reb Dosa, that the garments that the Kohen Gadol wears on Yom Kippur can be worn by a Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year? They're not the same garments. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur wears a gartel of linen, whereas the Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year, well, every day of the year, wears a gartel of shatnez. So again, we see that Rebbe's opinion is that the Kohen Hedyet wears a gartel of shatnez. Be'od, and additionally, begadim shenishtamshu ben kedusha chamura tishamish ben kedusha kala. These garments that were used for a very high level, an extremely high level of holiness, the avoda in the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur, you're just going to use it for sort of regular levels of holiness of a Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year. Therefore, Rebbe does not feel comfortable saying that Yilbash teaches that the begadim of a Kohen Gadol can be used by a Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year. Yilbash, then what do you learn out from Yilbash according to Rebbe? L'rabos es to teach that even worn out garments can be used for the avodah as long as they're not ripped. But if they're just worn out, you can, right, Yilbash, you can wear them even if they're worn out. That's Rebbe's opinion. Vaz Reb Dosa l'taime. Reb Dosa, who says that the garments of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur can be used by Kohen Hedyet the rest of the year, he goes according to his opinion. The Tanya is, we learn in the Brisa, v'nicham shab. Right, it says that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, he takes off the garments that he wore inside the Kodesh HaKodashim when he did the avodah, and he leaves them there. Which teaches that you have to bury them. You have to put them in geniza. Reb Dosa Omer says, Reb Dosa, Shelo yishtamish boen Yom Kippurim acher. It means that he can't use it for another Yom Kippur, but you don't necessarily have to, bury them. They can be used by another kohen hedyot the rest of the days of the year. So there you go. Very interesting discussion there. So we see that, once again, that the opinion of Rebbe is that the gartel of a kohen hedyot is made out of shatnez. There you have it. Which then, therefore, if we tie it back into the earlier machlokes, it must be that it's Reb Reb Shimon's opinion that the gartel of the kohen hedyot was made out of linen. Now we get into discussion of, so this backup kohen gadol that we now made mamish into a kohen gadol in order so that he could do the avodah on Yom Kippur. What happens to him when the kohen gadol, after Yom Kippur, when the primary kohen gadol is no longer possible? Now what happens? It's an interesting discussion. So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis thought irabo psul uminu acher tachtav. So if the primary kohen gadol developed some kind of a psul, so they had to make the backup into a mamish kohen gadol so he could do the avodah on Yom Kippur. Rishon chozul avodah. So when the primary kohen gadol becomes unpossel, so he goes back to his position as kohen gadol. Sheni. So now what happens with this second kohen gadol? Essentially, you have two kohen gadols now, right? What happens? You have the other kohen who you made into a kohen gadol so he could do the avodah. What happens to him now? There's two kohen gadols essentially. Called mitzvahs kuna gedola all of the Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, yeah, there's a duplicate. He's all the halachas of a kohen gadol, certain halachas like kohen gadol in terms of tumah, in terms of certain haircuts, things like that. There's different halachas, right? Kohen gadol makriv onein. So he's a kohen gadol. You have a duplicate kohen gadol. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, Rishon Chozul Avodaso, the primary kohen gadol goes back, reclaims his position. Sheni Eino Roila, the kohen gadol, the kohen hedyot, says Rabbi Yossi that the backup kohen gadol, he kind of is stuck in the middle. He's a kohen gadol, so you can't do things as a kohen hedyot because he's not a kohen hedyot. So he can't do like avodah and 4 begadim like he's a kohen gadol. But he also doesn't act as the kohen gadol because there's a different kohen gadol. So he's kind of stuck. Right, so again, Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, Rishon Chozul Avodaso, the primary kohen gadol, takes back his place as the kohen gadol. Sheni Eino Roi, lo kohen gadol, lo kohen hedyot. The second is not fit to be neither a kohen gadol nor a kohen hedyot. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi, Ma'aseh Yosef ben Elam Mitzipori. There was a story from Yosef ben Elam of Tzipori she'irbo psul b'kohen gadol, that the primary kohen gadol got a psul minu tachtav, and they appointed Yosef ben Elam to be the kohen gadol in his place for the avodah on Yom Kippur. And what they said to Yosef ben Elam is, look, now that the kohen gadol is no longer possible, he takes back his place as the kohen gadol. You, Yosef ben Elam, are not fit to be a kohen gadol or a kohen hedyot at this point. Kohen gadol mishum eva. The reason why Yosef ben Elam, why the backup kohen gadol can't be the kohen gadol, can't be a duplicate kohen gadol when the primary kohen gadol becomes unpossel, is because of eva, because of like bad vibes between the primary kohen gadol and this new kohen gadol. It's not nice to have kind of duplicates around. It creates weird vibes. And therefore, the kohen gadol is always going to be kind of like self-conscious that the backup kohen gadol, who's now the duplicate, is always just going to want the primary one to like die so that he could take the kohen gadol. It's not going to create a healthy environment, Darton. So therefore, the backup kohen gadol, so he can't serve as like a duplicate kohen gadol because of Eva, kohen hedyot, and he also can't be a kohen hedyot, just a regular kohen, because we go up in holiness, we don't go down in holiness. Therefore, if we upgraded him to be a kohen gadol, we're not going to downgrade him to be a kohen hedyot. So therefore, he can't. Nishtahin nishtaher. Rabbi Yochanan halacha Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yochanan that the halacha is taka like Rabbi Yossi, that the backup becomes stuck. Umodu Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yossi nonetheless admits that if this backup kohen gadol, who is now an actual kohen gadol, even though he shouldn't be doing any kind of avoda, neither as a kohen gadol nor as a kohen hedget, if he did do the avoda as a kohen gadol, not as a kohen hedget because he's not a kohen hedget, but if he did do avoda in the Beis Hamikdash as a kohen gadol, it would work, because the fact of the matter is he is a kohen gadol, but he shouldn't. He should just be stuck. Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav says Rav Yehuda didn't Rav halacha Rabbi Yossi, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Moder Rabbi Yossi, however, Rabbi Yossi admits she'im meis rishon shechozol avodah, so that if the primary kohen gadol dies, well then at that point the one who is the backup becomes the primary kohen gadol. Pshita, the Gemara says, yeah, okay, that's obvious. What's the big chiddush there? Well, you may have thought that, well, if you say this, that if the primary kohen gadol dies, then the backup kohen gadol becomes the kohen gadol, maybe that might also create kind of weird vibes, because like, you know, the whole time that now the primary kohen gadol is alive, he's always like thinking in the back of his mind, well, the backup really just wants me to die, and then he'll become kohen gadol, and maybe that's weird vibes. So maybe because we don't want weird vibes, then we just say that the backup kohen gadol never becomes kohen gadol. We say no, that's not true. If the primary kohen gadol dies, so then this backup now is able to become kohen gadol. That was daf Yud Beis of Masechta Yoma. My opinion is that it was a very interesting daf. What did we discuss? Inheritance of Jerusalem. Was Jerusalem divided up to any tribes? So one opinion is yes, it was divided up to Judah and Binyamin. The other opinion is that no, it wasn't divided up to any tribes. All the tribes had an equal claim to Jerusalem. Interesting. We discussed the belt of a kohen hedget. What was it made out of, right? So the belt of a kohen gadol in general is made out of shatnez. It's made out of linen and different kinds of wools. The belt of the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, when he does the avodah in the Kodesh HaKodashim, is made out of linen. What about the belt of a kohen hedget? So it's machlokas. Rebbe says it's made out of shatnez, just like the belt of a kohen gadol, and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says it's made out of linen, the belt of a kohen hedget. Very interesting. Using the garments of a kohen gadol on Yom Kippur for a kohen hedget, right? The four garments that the kohen gadol wears, lefnai v'lefnim, on Yom Kippur, can a kohen hedget wear them the rest of the days of the year? Rebbe says no. First of all, they're different. The kohen gadol on Yom Kippur, his gartel is made out of linen, whereas the kohen hedget the rest of the days of the year, his gartel is made out of shatnez. So they're not even the same garments, b'chlal. And also, these garments that were used in the Kodesh HaKodashim for the avodah of Yom Kippur, you're just going to use for regular avodah. So therefore, Rebbe's not into it. Reb Dosa says, yeah, sure, you can use the garments that the Yom Kippur wore, that the Kohen Gadol wore for the avodah of Yom Kippur. You can use them for other avodas, and for the avodah of a kohen hedget the rest of the days of the year. And then we got to the discussion of the backup kohen gadol, right? So when he becomes the kohen gadol, I skipped actually talking, interesting discussion. But anyways, we'll get there back there in a second. But the backup kohen gadol, so he mamish became a kohen gadol, and maybe now I'll say what I skipped, which is that we saw an interesting machlokas between Abaye and Rav Papa about how does this backup kohen gadol mamish become a kohen gadol so that he can do the avodah on Yom Kippur. So he said, look, if the primary kohen gadol becomes pasul before the Talmud Shel Shachar, well then that is easy, because the backup kohen gadol, by offering the Talmud Shel Shachar in the Shmona Begadim, so then he mamish becomes the kohen gadol. And then by the time the avodah of Yom Kippur comes along, he is already the kohen gadol by then. Now, says, but what about if the primary kohen gadol only became pasul after the Talmud Shel Shachar? So then, how does the backup kohen gadol become kohen gadol? So Abaye says, well, just put on the 8 begadim, go up to the mizbeach, take a fork and prod some of the meat, and then it'll become kohen gadol. It says Rav Papa, you don't need to do that. By doing the avodah of Yom Kippur, so since the avodah of Yom Kippur has to be done by the kohen gadol, memele, that makes him into the kohen gadol. And then the question is, what happens after Yom Kippur when the primary kohen gadol becomes unpasul? What about the backup? What happens to him? We now have duplicate kohen gadol. So Rav Meir says exactly, we have duplicate kohen gadols. Rabbi Yossi says no, this backup guy basically gets stuck. That he can't serve as a kohen hedget because he's not a kohen hedget. And he also can't serve as a kohen gadol because that would create weird vibes between them. So therefore, he's just kind of stuck. However, if the primary kohen gadol dies, so then the backup kohen gadol becomes kohen gadol chevre. I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd Beis of Masechta Yoma, cheers.